another hand came up out of my hand and went through my dog's chin. And then air came out of me, and I loaded above my body, and I was no longer an atheist, because as soon as I left my body, it was like waking up into a ultimate reality. In fact, I was more alive than I am now. I was floating above my body, chilling out, felt great, felt wonderful. I could see myself laying on the floor, and then I could see the ceiling. And I remember the ceiling was a textured ceiling where they troweled it. So they had a trowel, and so a fingerprint of the guy troweling, or the painter, was up in there under a fold of ceiling texture. So my face was stuck in the ceiling staring at it, and I couldn't move. I could see the room behind everywhere, but I was just fixated on that fingerprint. And then boom, went above, right through the roof. All I know is, as soon as I went above the swamp cooler, I entered into, I call it, a pleasant darkness, pitch black, like inside of a cave, blacker than that, darker than that. And I could see a pinprick of light way off in the distance, and I was being propelled toward it.
Bryan, it's so good to see you, my friend. Welcome back to the show.
Oh, it's great to be back, Shaun. It's been a while since I've seen you. It's been quite a while, actually. But yeah, how are you doing?
Well, I stay busy. There is no lack of projects, or really not a lot of rest in Christian publishing. You're always living kind of in this ever-moving kind of 3 seasons of work. And so lots of stuff with books and PR and interviews. It never stops, but I enjoy it. So, hey, I'm glad to be working in this space. For some of you who've seen earlier conversations with me and Bryan, we're going to be covering some of the same ground we did a few years back. I am reconnecting with all of my old NDE friends, if you will, just doing fresh interviews with everybody, because there's only so much you can cover in each interview. And I found through the years, whether you hear Bryan or Randy Kay or whoever it might be speak once, or say 50 times, I feel like the Holy Spirit always shows up in a unique way. People respond differently to the message, even if it's somewhat the same as has been shared before. And so I've just been enjoying reconnecting with friends in this space and putting some fresh focus on their stories. So that's what we're going to do today with Bryan. But Bryan, before we kind of get into when you were doing construction in Arizona, is Arizona, right? If I remember correctly.
Yeah, Arizona, Tucson.
I want to talk back about your early life, because before your NDE, you describe yourself as a militant atheist, but it's not like you grew up in a godless household and never went to church. So I'd love to hear a little bit about your family, your church upbringing, and just in terms of the faith, like what were you exposed to as a child?
I grew up in a Southern Baptist home. My dad was a preacher's kid, and but he World War II veteran, and so he didn't follow the call, I guess. He just got out of the military, then took some schooling, and he was ended up getting a job in the government with in the National Park Service in buildings and maintenance and ground at the headquarters of the Park Service. And then my mom was a stay-at-home mom, and then she had to earn some money, so she worked for the National Security Agency, Army Security Agency. Then she transferred into the National Park Service, where she at that time, she was responsible for putting together big programs like the Christmas tree lighting, the fireworks, and everything else that goes on, also things like that. And there's a picture of her with the Queen of England, walking down the street together. That's what she did. She trying to PR work. She put together all these big programs. So they were Southern Baptists, and I grew up in a Southern Baptist home, and I was dragged to church all the time, but I was, I don't think it really set in. I just remember a hot summer night, and I was, before air conditioning, everybody had these little fans. They're sitting in church, and I was a little kid, and my mom, I was playing with all these animals or toy soldiers and making a noise, and my dad's trying to make me stop. And then I heard about baptism, so I asked my mom what baptism was, and she explained it. You go into a pool, and you get clean. And I was thinking, I'm hot. It's a pool. I remember doing this. I thought it was a big pool and I can jump in. And I said, I want to be baptized, and I'm sweating and all that. But she said, no. When you're ready, something about being ready, you'll know when. I was just probably too young and wearing a starchy suit, sweating in a hot August day in Virginia in a church. So, but anyway, that's how it was. And then I grew up 10 miles south of Washington, D.C. during this 1960s. And as a kid, and then 60s. And so all the protests, all the stuff that's going on, and the actual real racism, not the contrived stuff that's conjecture now, existed. And so it was just, I got to a certain age where I didn't believe anything. I didn't want to believe in Jesus, whatever. So I decided to, and I was an agnostic. There could be a God. I remember thinking that. And then I found out that through watching all things Bullwinkle cartoons, that Simon and the Time Machine, they go back and interview Aristotle and Plato and all these things. And so I was an inquisitive kid, and our reading level back in those days are a lot higher than they are now. So I would go to the library and get Plato's Republic. So I got Plato's Republic, and I'm reading it. And I remember my mom, like all good moms do, I said, "Mom, what does this word mean? What does this word mean?" She slams a dictionary down. Look it up. So I started looking up all the words. And so from that, I wrote a children's right for freedom or liberty or something. It was a declaration of independence for kids to be free from their parents and eat ice cream and cookies all you want and throw away your parents. They're old. You know, I wrote this down, my mom, for a school project, and she read it and she looked at me and she felt in tears. "Do you think this about us?" I go, I felt real small, so I never turned that paper and wrote another one. Threw it away. So right away, I was into Plato's Republic, and that kind of led me down the path into atheism later on. So I bounced back and forth. And I stopped going to church. They couldn't make me, and I didn't want to go anymore. I put a really good fight for it. I make a big scene. So I didn't go. And I would stay at home, watch cartoons, and then wait till they get home, and we go do whatever parents and kids do on Sunday afternoon. Back then, like visit relatives. And then later, as I went into high school and junior high school and all that, I really fell away from the Lord. I was agnostic and atheist, and eventually became full-blown atheist. And I moved out of my house. I think it was the end of 1977 or 1978. I can't. And so my friend was a member of a bike club in Virginia. I tell people about it now. It's a subchapter of a very large, prominent bike club in the East Coast. That's the antithesis of the Hell's Angels. So it's the East Coast version called the Pagans. So there's a subchapter. So I hung out with these guys. And so I wrote about it in my first book, A Land Unknown, Hell's Dominion, just one little snippet of it. But that's just a crazy lifestyle. So I was drinking, partying, there's all kinds of things. And then eventually decided to move to Tucson. So that's how I just kind of fell away. And at that time, being in the bike club, I was just a militant atheist. And I had Christians come and witness to me. I would debate them. You know, usually they were more Calvinist leaning, and that was easy to swat away. It really was. Not to offend Calvinists, but, you know, your predestination things justifies a lot of people to fall away from the faith. I'm just going to tell you. And so it was, so there are a few Christians I could not at all thwart because they would box me in. Some of them were my relatives. I go to my grandparents' farm in Southwest Virginia, and they would witness to me, and my uncle and aunt were witnessing to me. And I was putting a big thing about evolution, how great evolution was, explained everything. And he asked me where the first seed come from, the first plant. So I said, from stardust colliding. Where'd the stardust come from? Well, there's a couple atoms, they kind of bumped in. Where did the atoms come from? Where the nuclei from the atoms come from? He kept reducing it down to absurdity. I didn't have a leg to stand on. I was stumped. They planted seeds, and I still was adamant about it. So that's how I was back then.
And Bryan, what brings you to Tucson, Arizona? Just curious why you decided to move there, and then take us into that kind of day in the life before you had your NDE. Like, in terms of all the people I've met in the past 8-9 years, in terms of the thing that took you out, it's one of the more unique ones. I've never forgotten it.
Yeah. Well, what brought me here, since years have passed, and I don't know if some of these people are still alive, I was involved in some heavy duty stuff. So I remember, this is why I took the geographic cure, because things were getting too heavy. So I'm at work. I worked at a community college in the janitorial department. So my employer, my boss, and my the supervisor, and these nice guys wearing these nice suits from the FBI came in and said, "We would like for you, the head honcho over here is breaking in and stealing chemicals and make drugs. We want you to help him break in here but I said, what? Are you kidding me? The feds are very persuasive and very forceful. I mean, if you're never confronted by one, it's actually quite frightening, intimidating. And they said, well, you will be arrested with them, and basically I'd be a snitch. I said, no, thank you. So I called up the guy, his phone was probably tapped. Anyway, I called him up and told him, hey, you got a snitch in there. It ain't me. And these feds came in and they did this, that, and the other. They want me. I ain't doing it. I'm out of here. And I end up, everything went fine. And he actually continued to break in to another place and was caught. So someone else, they snookered in for that. So he was serving time. But it was just the drugs, the alcohol, and the insanity of that environment that I just had to get out of there, especially when you had the feds questioning you. And so the FBI. So I just took off. So that was early, probably 1979 or 8-ish, somewhere around there when they questioned me. It was like 79 probably. And and so I waited around for almost not quite a year, and I decided, I'm going to fly to Tucson, Arizona. I have relatives out there. One's Pentecostal relatives, the others were, I think, Baptist or whatever. I stayed with them. I found a job, found a place to rent, and because the jobs were scarce in 1980 because of the recession and stuff. So I was able to get an electrician's job. I was studying to be an electrician. I was finish out my apprenticeship. So I found a place. I got a job there and got a place. I had to be there in two weeks to go to work. So I talked to a friend, and he wanted to take the geographic here too. And for whatever reasons he had, because we kind of drifted apart a little bit when I was hanging out with all these other folks. But anyway, he said, yeah, so we moved there. And another friend from Virginia came later, and I had a duplex apartment, and there was no bedroom. There were 2 bedrooms and 1 laundry room, and one guy slept in the laundry room. And I had 1 room. The other guy had the other room. So we had a full house, had my dog. That's how I got there. It's the truth to be known. Now I tell people a little bit about it because it was kind of embarrassing. And looking back on it, I'm just glad I'm not in that lifestyle anymore. I would not be here.
Right. Well, and I appreciate your willingness to just paint the picture of kind of who you were and the life you lived, because I feel like it's important context. Because on the other side of it, in terms of so many of our friends who've shared their near-death experiences, most of you are very evangelistic, telling people about Jesus, and it's in stark contrast to the life you lived before you had your NDE. So at the time, right before your NDE, I remember you're working construction. It's an extremely hot day. There's a water cooler involved that has some sketchy water in it, and that takes us into your story. So take us into that day. What started you moving towards having your near-death experience?
Well, I was just living the party life. Like I said, I was part of a chapter. It's a different bike club with a different name. And so I left that group, and they were associated with the other ones. You pay your dues, all that. And so I just came out, and I had that lifestyle of just drinking. I was a heavy drinker and party and all the stuff. And so it was just total freedom. I go to Arizona. I go into 7-Eleven or Circle K, and there's liquor there. It's an alcoholic's paradise, And so, it's like, so that's what I was doing: working, partying, drinking, having fun, hiking in the canyons in the desert out there. One night, fell on a cactus and then landed on my hand, and boy, that sure hurt. And but anyway, it was a unique place, and we did caving there as well. There's some caves out there. I did all kinds of things. I'm just having fun. And then, so I was working that day, and we were doing underground work. I was, the caliche, they call the soil caliche, is rock hard. So a backhoe would come out and break it up and scoop it out. We leveled the trench out, and we laid the pipes down to pull our wires through for these apartment complexes. And so we get up around, I think it was like 4 in the morning, we had to be there. We get off in the early afternoon, like 12 or 1. It's just too hot to work. And so by probably, I would say maybe 9 or 10, maybe 10 o'clock, it was so hot, we moved to go work inside where everybody else was, inside the apartments, where some shade was, because our boss told us to come out and get out of the sun. So as I was walking up, had no idea that my supervisor, who was a Turner Burn Christian who had bumper stickers and about the CBN Club and Christian Broadcasting Network and all kinds of stickers on there. And he always read his Bible. right in front of us, and we would throw things at him and make fun of him, make jokes at him. He never fired us. That always left an impression upon me because he didn't respond. And there was another guy that you just couldn't get. He was a Christian, I would egg him on too to do it. But anyway, he took his kids to Nogales, Mexico, just across the border there, and his truck overheated. And that was the company truck, which was his truck too. And it overheated. So he used one of the company coolers to fill it up with water from, from a creek or stream or something from Mexico. And he brought it back over, inadvertently brought it back, didn't even think about it. And so we had two coolers. Everybody had two coolers. So our truck had one cooler with fresh water in it. Had no idea the other one had. He never told me at least not to drink of that water. But the other one was empty, so I picked up that big old thermos and just much more stronger and buff than I am now. I just picked that thing up and I was just guzzling that thing down, and I handed it over to my coworker. He laid it on the back of the truck because it's too heavy for him. He took a drink. He took a short drink. He spat it out, and my supervisor was yelling, blood curdling yell, "Don't drink that!" And I remember looking at him like yesterday, looking up. He's in the second floor or third floor or wherever he was, just looking down at me, yelling, and his eyes were big, and he comes storming down there. By the time he got to there, we opened the cooler up. And so inside the cooler was algae. It was reddish brown now. It's no oxygen. There was like green seaweed type, fungus type stuff in there. And the one thing that really struck me that I have memories of to this day is like a flat noodle, just one of those flat noodles, like an egg noodle, a little wider than an egg noodle. And it was white. It was swimming, had eyeball on it, was just swimming around in that, and all these little things floating around and swimming in it. Who knows what else was in there. The smell was terrible. I drank that. And he told us where he got it and all that, not to drink it. He did say he kept apologizing. I guess he thought, he couldn't. That's the only thing he could do. I finished up the day and I thought, well, I'll just go home and drink some Jack Daniels and Jose Cuervo, whatever I got, take the John Wayne Cure, the old Granddad or Cuddy Shark or something, and just wash down and I'll be fine in the morning. And it did not work because the next morning I went to work, and that's when the first symptoms. Later, I was found out that I had cholera. I had a neurotoxin from the, which I can't remember the type. I wrote it down, but it's, I can't read my writing. I found a piece of paper, and it's also old, and then the pencil's faded. But it's a neurotoxin, then some type of dysentery. So I had basically a concoction that could kill you. And cholera was the other combined as a number on you. And that's what happened. The next day, less than 12 hours later, the first symptoms hit, and the rest is history.
So you're feeling deathly ill. I know at some point you end up back home and things begin to take a turn for the worse. So take us into what's happening because I think you go to, if I remember correctly, you went to work the next day and you ended up going back home shortly thereafter because you just felt so awful.
Yeah. I went in there. I was trimming out, working inside that day in the model home or the model apartment. And so I was putting in the bathroom and the GFI plug, installing it, trimming it out. And everything's nice. It's all set to go to show. And here they had no toilet paper in there. And I had my first attack. It's like it goes, you vomit and it comes out the other way. So I made a mess of the trash can and the toilet and had no toilet paper. And so I apologized about using a towel. They said, don't worry about it. And they looked at me and said, they sent me home really quick. I managed to drive home, but it was just coming so fast. The fever came shortly after that. High fever developed, and I remember sweating. I remember getting chills, and the pain was excruciating.
And at any point, did you feel like, gosh, I should go to the doctor? Or were you just so stubborn you were going to take care of this yourself?
I was a stubborn, immortal young guy. I've been sick before, and I will just suffer through it, and this will pass, and I'll tough it out. I'm a man. What is it about guys and doctors? I don't know, but that's how I thought. And my two buddies, they wanted me to go to the hospital. They were, take you to the hospital. You need to go to the hospital. You got to go to the hospital, and I refused. And so we also had plans. This was right around the 4th, before the 4th of July. This is June. So we had, I can't remember if it was the week before the 4th or the week of the 4th of July, but one of those 2 weeks of June, we had plans to go up to Phoenix, Arizona. And one of the guys' relatives had a small plane and they were going to fly everybody up to the Grand Canyon and see the Grand, and then fly back. It was an all-day adventure. And I thought that would be neat, take an hour flight to the Grand Canyon and then see everything and then come back. And we were all planning on it. So the day that it was getting ready to leave, they were going to take me to the hospital and cancel their trips. I did not know anything about cholera, and you can look it up in the medical journal. And this happens because when your body goes into shock before you die, you feel great. My stomach felt like razor blades from my stomach all the way down to the end of my intestines, and it was just, the pain was excruciating, and it just goes out both ends constantly, and you're basically dehydrating. So when your body goes into shock with cholera, you feel great. You get up, you walk around. And that morning I got up, look, I'm better. I toughed it out. I'll shake this off. And I drank some water and took some sips of water for them. And they said, we're taking you to the hospital, called me a few choice names. I said, no, you guys go ahead and go. But they said, okay, we got our neighbor going to check in on you in a little while to see how you're doing. And he has the key and everything. So that's fine. I'm fine. I'll be okay. Look, I'm okay. I'm walking around. I can let my dog out and I can do things. So I talked them out. So they just went ahead, got in the truck. I remember looking out the kitchen window, and I remember my friend just looking at me, shaking his head, saying, I could read his lips. He said, what an idiot. And so, which I was actually, should have went to the hospital, but and then it hit me. I collapsed on the floor. It took me about 3 hours or roughly. We're going to have to crawl about 30 or 40 feet back to the bathroom and the bedroom and lift myself on the bed because the pain was so intense. The fever hits, your teeth are rattling and you're shaking. And I had a swamp cooler and it didn't really work in there. I think it was probably about 95 in the house. That's pretty cool in Arizona. But anyway, and so I had pillows. I had blankets. I had a sleeping bag and other things on top of me because I was cold. I was just chilled and shaking. That's how I got there.
Right. So you're like shortly after your friends leave, you collapse, you crawl and slowly and painfully make your way back towards your bedroom. You make it back to your bed. How long is it before you enter into your out of body experience from when you collapsed to when you realized you were outside of your body? Like how long was that?
Well, the first time was I was in the bathroom. And after I had an attack and I tried to clean up the stuff and whatever I did, managed it somehow, barely, but I woke up with my body and my head pressed against the door with my dog scratching. And for a second, I thought I was standing looking down at my body. And then I was back in my body and I woke up with like a start. And then I opened the door and crawled out. I couldn't stand up. I crawled into the bedroom. My room was right next to the bathroom, so it's probably maybe 6 feet of crawling. Lifted myself on the bed, and I wish I would have went to the hospital because things were not right. I can't explain it at all. It's just something wasn't right, and I knew it. Being an atheist, I was just going to die. I'm going to be a dead hunk of meat. That's how I always believe. But when the push comes to shove, at that time and you have an awareness that it's coming or could come right quick. Those are things that, I just wish I could have gotten help. I just wish somebody could have came in and got me. I wish my dog would have got help or something when my dog is not Lassie. And so I just laid on the bed on my back, shivering, and things were getting surreal looking and echoey, a little dizzy, and the pain was too intense to really, it was just incredible nerve pain and gut pain. It's just like something, you have to experience the same stuff to know what I'm talking about. It's excruciating. And all I remember is laying on my back and I was trying to pet my dog. And then I noticed that I could see the ceiling, and without my glasses, I'm very nearsighted. And so I looked at my dog. I could see my dog clearly, and my hand was laying over the bed like so. And another hand came up out of my hand and went through my dog's chin. And then air came out of me, and I loaded above my body, and I was no longer an atheist because as soon as I left my body, it was like waking up into a ultimate reality. In fact, I was more alive than I am now. That's exactly how it was. And I floated above my body. I could see. Yeah, I did not look very well. I was sort of a palish with color with little blue blotches in my skin. I had no elasticity in my skin because cholera. You can take your forearm and you try to pinch it, your skin will go down, but your cholera, you pinch it, it stays up. And they tested me, of course, at the hospital, and I remember them doing that. I was pretty much totally dehydrated at that time, and I was gone. I was floating above my body, chilling out. Felt great. Felt wonderful.
That's not an uncommon reaction where once somebody, especially who has been very ill or who has had a terrible accident or some kind of a medical incident, when we become untethered, our spirit becomes untethered from our physical body. Often near-death experiences will describe having immediate relief, feeling better than they've ever felt before, or like you said, you all of a sudden had 20/20 vision without your glasses. You could see things that
Yeah.
normally you couldn't see with your glasses off. You know, you're one of a handful of people I've encountered who's talked about when they were in their spirit body, they tried to pet their dog, and that's just really confusing and concerning when your hand goes through your pet. Probably not something we're normally expecting. How long were you able to interact with your environment, Bryan, before your body started rising? Like, was that a short period of time?
As soon as I left, I was no longer interacting with it. As soon as my hand went through my dog's chin, I call it my spirit man, or whatever you want to call it. Just went. I had a physical. I didn't have a physical form. I had a spiritual form. It's shaped like this, But couldn't tell you what my face looked like. But anyway, I never no mirrors. But anyway, I was just floating above my body and kind of rocking back and forth. Looking at the room, I could hear pristine clear. I could hear the neighbors fighting. There's a young married couple. They always fought. You could hear the dishes break sometimes, is that type of thing. And then I could hear some kids kicking a can down the road, and saw so clear, more. In fact, I saw colors in the room and hues of light I've never seen before. And I have no reference. I can't paint a painting and get those. I don't think our eyes naturally see those unless you've gone. I mean, it's the only thing I can say.
Yeah, a lot of people describe it as having like 360-degree vision. Like it's we don't have
Yeah, it
something
is.
in our human body experience really to compare to it, but people can see like everything all the way around them.
Yep. I could see myself laying on the floor, and then I could see the ceiling. And I remember the ceiling was a textured ceiling where they troweled it. So they had a trowel, and so a fingerprint of the guy troweling or the painter was up in there under a fold of ceiling texture. So my face was stuck in the ceiling staring at it, and I couldn't move. I could see the room behind everywhere, but I was just fixated on that fingerprint. And then boom, went above, right through the roof. I could see the kids kicking the can down. I went right past the swamp cooler. I mean, I didn't know this about the swamp cooler. It had a baling wire and one access port where you put the screws in, and there's a bandana wrapped around it, rigged up to hold it together. Later, a month or so later, I went up there and I changed the filter, and that's exactly what I saw, the bandana and the wire. And being an electrician, I have the tools. I fixed it for the landlord for a little bit of money taken off the rent. So it was, to see that, and then just you go real quick. I just went by it. My eyes were fixated on the object. I just went above, and then I was in dark.
And that's something you hear from different people's experiences where they will see something that's in an odd place, shoe on a ledge somewhere, or something strange sitting inside of a light, something you can't see when you're just in your body and looking up at something. So I love that, when you went to fix the swamp cooler, you're able to verify what you saw as you rose through the ceiling and through the attic and whatnot. So once you rise above your roof line and you're able to see what's happening around you, were you pulled towards a tunnel or a light? Was it that kind of a traditional NDE transition, or what was your transition like from kind of being in the sky, if you will, into what I would likely guess is kind of that second heaven realm?
Well, for me, I knew nothing about these type of things ever happening. So at the time in 1980, you just didn't hear about them. And plus, being an atheist, I wouldn't have believed them anyway. But so I have no reference point. All I know is as soon as I went above the swamp cooler, I entered into, I call it a pleasant darkness, pitch black, like inside of a cave, blacker than that, darker than that. And I could see a pinprick of light way off in the distance, and I was being propelled toward it. And that's exactly what I saw. I had no more pain. I was chilling out, and I felt, this is what confuses people. I felt great love and mercy. I felt all this stuff. And all of a sudden, I began hearing this beautiful music. Being an amateur musician, playing guitar for, a long time, 50 years or so right now. And I heard instruments I can't even describe. And the singing was in a different language, but I could understand the words. And they were, if you go in your Bible and you hear that the Lord is righteous, holy, just is he, things like that, that's what they were singing. But when they sang it, you had understanding about the attributes of God's character traits in a way, then a depth that we lacked. I still carry a lot of that in me. There's no way I can express it. And it's like explaining the majesty of the Lord. It's like, I always say, it's like having the mysteries of the universe displayed in grandeur. Every question is answered. All the whys are, whys evil answered. I was just floating through that, and some of it is erased from your memory, but I remember I wrote a lot of it, some of it down. And so you intuitively, it's through your intuitiveness, it just engages that. And I could also felt like a voice was speaking to me from the light, and I was being propelled toward it. And I felt great love and compassion, but I didn't know the love and compassion that I felt and what was being spoken to me was going to judge me. I was being judged by God's love is the only thing I can say. And basically, you are without excuse. And some people reach this place. Other people just go immediately judge. The judgment comes in different forms for different people. But mine, I just was floating toward the light. And as the voice was speaking to me, it'd have we call it life reviews, but it takes longer to tell about it or write about it than it did when you had it. It's almost like in an instant, little views of your life. I was my birth on up to a little kid, at church and with the baptism thing to I told you about earlier, and then growing up and falling away. And I had good parents. I had the best parents in the world, and I learned in life that most people don't have good parents, and so it's or no parents. But here I am. The Lord showed me all the stuff He helped me with. He showed me things. I was in this life review. I don't know how many times I drove drunk and almost got killed, myself or other people. Went over Gallows Road in Northern Virginia, there over a hill, and went airborne in my station wagon with all my friends in and girlfriends and everybody else in it. Went airborne, and the car literally moved, missed a tree, missed oncoming traffic, and stayed in the right lane. I had no control of the car. Something controlled it. I remember when I got to the bottom of the hill, everybody slapping me on the back and wanting to do it again. Nope, not me. And another time, I was in junior high school, and I didn't go to the school that we were supposed to. We were shipped to another school, part of some government program that I can't mention. I don't want to get anybody in trouble. And so I was severely beaten with severe concussion, almost to the point of death, in a junior high school by people of other skin color because I was a minority in there. So I remember this is what the Lord showed me. I got out of the gym area, got up into the main hallway between classes, and they're beating on me with these wood pallets shaped like a fist. And the two principal and the associate principal walked away, turned their back and walked away, and they surrounded me, and they hit me in the back of the head. I saw stars. And they said, that honky has a hot head. That's the last I heard. I saw stars. And then for life of me, I don't know how I made it to the stairs and walked up the stairs, but in the life review, it showed there was an angel grabbed me and got me up there. And I had a severe concussion from this. And the only thing they told my parents, he got hurt in the gym. Yeah, right. Concussions are not fun. And so that's the type of things he showed me. Then he showed me, how I hated God, how people debated, how He sent people to me, and how I'd go hiking in the mountains. I could see the nature's God, or whatever you want to, as the Thomas Jefferson wrote in the Declaration of Independence, nature's God. I remember a lot of times thinking about nature's God as an agnostic, but I denied it all. He was showing me that. He showed me how good he was, how many times he'd spared my life from getting shot several times to literally shot, almost killed. But just things like that. He showed how good he was to me despite myself. And I was basically abusing God's love without knowing it. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do means a lot to me. When Jesus said that, they just don't know how they're abusing God's love and his mercy and his goodness. I sure did.
And as that life review wrapped up, like, how did it make you feel? I think a lot of us assume having a life review would make us feel shameful, but like for a lot of people, the life review is one of the most transformative parts of their near-death experience, their encounter on the other side. Like at the end of the life review, like I want to say what was going on in your head, but I don't know if that's appropriate, or
Yeah,
want to say what was going on in
is.
your mind. We'll use the best words we have. Like, how did you feel when that was over?
Well, it was going through the void, going toward the light, and the light was getting bigger. I thought, this is okay. I can chill out. I'm going to be in heaven. That's what I was thinking. That's exactly what I was thinking. That's what it felt like. Oh, I had these bad raps. That must may earn me brownie points by having all the bad raps. That's exactly how I was thinking. But that wasn't so, because I went a little longer than what most people do. I saw the light, and it looked like a rock suspended in space, and light was coming from a person upon the rock. And he was sitting on this rather good sized rock. And I could see like a beautiful city on one side with a wall, and then it just went totally dark. Then I could see, look like a pancake, like a burning embers off, to be to my right. And I didn't know what was going on. I had no clue. I just felt great. And I'm going to heaven. I mean, heaven must be real. Whatever, I was chilling out. That's how I thought. And I didn't have any fear. Nothing. I was at peace. I think I was more at peace with myself and felt the best I've ever felt. And through the life review. But when I saw the person, he was sitting on, there's like a rock, a wall, and he has a little like seat sticking out of this rock wall, and he was sitting on it, and he was so bright. Light just flowed through him. And again, I cannot describe, I say snow, color of snow. That type of white is even more different than the whitest white you can possibly think of. And with the sun shining on it, just bright. And then your eyes adapt to seeing him. And he got up, he walked down to some stairs, and I just floated feet first in front of him. And I landed, and then I saw him. I fell face forward, flat on my face. And I don't know, this part I just stuck in my mind because someone picked me up. They didn't apply any pressure on my back. It was like they had crazy glue or something. They stuck it on my hand and lifted me up. And then they, with force, right in front of them. And this is a part that most people who have after-death experience don't go beyond. And, mine, I always wondered, well, Lord, why did I have mine? I mean, why is this? Why I see what I see? And never in a million years ever thought that all these years later I'd be in debates with people who had these NEDs, but they never went beyond into the judgment, the further judgment. Or they went to a place they thought was heaven, but it's not. And so anyway, I stood before the Lord. I could see the holes in his wrist, and he had a hood over his face, and my eyes adjusted, and I could see like cakes of blood on his beard on this. And I didn't see his face, but the intensity of his stare, you felt it. And this was more frightening than hell, standing before the Lord, because what was shown me was my real sin nature, what I'm really like on the inside. I have no excuses. He gave me good parents. All the stuff began to make sense. I abused what God gave me, and this is it. Proved by my life, how I live my life. I determined what good and evil was. I determined what love is and what love is not. I even put God, I made terms with God. If you're a really real God, you would turn stones to bread and help all the poor. If you're really God, you would let everybody into heaven. There's hell stuff, if you're really God. I was guilty of making a God in my own image. All those things is pretty much what I was doing. And it was like being judged in a silence, and he was speaking to me by thought. And when you speak a few words, it was like paragraphs of meaning, totally without excuses. It's frightening to see what you really are like, the parts that nobody else sees. That's in there, but no one else sees. Because I was a good old boy, never meaning no harm. I just, did all kinds of bad things and all that stuff, but thought I was a good old boy.
And Bryan, did you realize that was Jesus right away?
Mhm.
Did you know who it was?
Absolutely. Yep. It was a knowing. You just know this is Jesus. He's the judge. I know
And
other people don't see this part. Other people, I think they probably do, but it's taken out of their mind. But it's a pretty powerful thing to be judged like this.
sure, absolutely. Like I said, kind of the whole life review phase tends to be one of the most transformative parts of a person's near death experience. So, Bryan, you have this life review. You're with Jesus. What happens next? Yours is not just a happy, warm, fuzzy. Go to the gates of heaven, see your welcoming committee, and go see God in the throne room. You take a different path. Tell us what happens next.
Well, he was judged me, and then he pulled out all these keys. He had all these keys on, and they're geometric shaped keys, and he just kind of pointed it. It would be to my right toward his left. Everything is symbolic, and this thing opened up like a scroll. It went into looked like a tunnel, and he spoke to me, and I wrote down the words. He told me, he says, "You will see a land unknown that's best forgotten." And he went on to kind of explain at a point at time, you may tell people about this. And then he said, when you come to this place and you feel a sense of overwhelming, say my name and my title, which I knew who it was. He gave me permission to say his name. And then he said, but remember, an option for your return is yet to be decided. That kind of even shakes me up to this day. It really feels it inside right now. It's like option for, and at the time I didn't really know what it meant, but I do now. And so thank you for the option. So I went inside of a dark tunnel. Sorry, my eyes are watering because it's kind of hard to think of this. Imagine you standing for Jesus being judged and he said that to you. And then you come back.
Right. I think any of us would be.
Tears me up to this day. I'm sorry.
No,
Let me get
that's
myself
okay.
together.
I think if we try to put ourselves in your shoes, any of us would be hoping against hope that we'd be able to stay there with Jesus and not go in some other direction.
Yeah. So I lifted up. And I noticed I was wearing this like filthy, to me, it looked like a judo suit. It had little pants legs and it was a robe and it was filthy, moth-eaten, yellowish brown, stinky, awful. You smell. And I didn't smell too good. It lifted me up and carried me to that opening, and it went into a tunnel. So I'm going in this tunnel, but all of a sudden the tunnel changed into the inside of a vortex of a tornado, yellowish, green colors, putrid colors I've never seen. If this is the Pale Rider's colors, that would be very difficult to try to sing. Most greens, it was just twirling like the inside of a tornado, and I was going through the tunnel, going to another light, strangely, oddly enough. And I knew I wasn't going to a good place. I knew that. I was going, I guess what they told me about hell is real. So I was headed there. And so I had all the images that you learn throughout, Sunday school or whatever you learn, images and cartoons about hell and flames and devils and pitchforks and all that. All of a sudden I could hear all this slurping noises and hissing, spitting. I heard guttural languages, hellish language, and shrieks and cries and moans, and the heat like a furnace blasting out at you. And I could and I was just going toward this light, and it wasn't pleasant. Then I hit the light, and then I hit the ground real quick, and I stood up, and it was a very dry area, and it looked like I was on one hill. Then on the other hill, they made a crevasse, like a real steep slope. There was a hill on the other side and a tree without a few leaves on it, but it just looked dilapidated, looked sort of a brown color and seemed to lack life. But I didn't see flames or devils with pitchforks. I just saw people coming out of the house, running down the hill, and more came up this crevasse and surrounded me and welcomed me and saying, "Welcome to paradise, Bryan. You're going to enjoy here. Can't you feel the love here?" I just remember them saying that over and over again. Can't you feel the love here? Can't you this is welcome. So I saw some people who I know have died and others who did not die. And I confronted those people, said, "You can't be that." And and these other people were trying to jostle me and trying to distract me. But one guy came up. He was at a party at my house one time, and he left the house and he got killed. He mouthed off to somebody, and they drove by with a shotgun and blew his guts out. And so I I saw him there and I said, you can't be in paradise. That's exactly what I said. Then he began to transform into another person right in front of me. And then all of a sudden, all their eyes looked like alligator eyes, yellow irises, alligator-like. That's the only thing I can say. It's like remind me of alligator eyes. And then they began to circumambulate, just started to go real slow around me. And it was almost getting like dizzying at first. And then they changed into what they really were. Then I remembered him saying to me, say my name and my title when you feel a sense of overwhelming. And I sure did, because I had permission to. So I said, Jesus Christ, nonstop the whole time I was there. I did not relent from it one iota. It was like a machine gun. You don't breathe like you do here. You have to take a breath. It just comes out naturally. And when I said that, they stood back. They could poke me. They could touch me. And some of their touches were ice. There's an icy coldness to it. It's almost like a shock of electricity of evil. They touched you, but they couldn't latch hold of you as long as I said the name. And they wanted to shred me to pieces. They wanted to tear me up. So this one creature came out that I later nicknamed Lizard Breath, sort of just my phrase for it. And he looked like a little dinosaur. And later on in 2007 there at the Centera shopping mall out here east of Loveland, Colorado, they have a sculpture park, and they actually have a sculpture of the entity I saw. The closest representation I ever saw was in the African art section called The Traveler. And it was on opening day. That's when I saw it, opening week, whatever. They had it described who made the statue as well as the story behind it. So I read it with my relatives who read my book and said, they said some name. They translates the traveler, the one who escorts you into the afterlife. Pretty creepy.
It seems rather fitting
it does.
A scary kind of way.
Yeah, and the stories, they grab people and they take them to the underlife. So they take their journey in life, like medicine men or whatever stuff, or whatever, people who follow their religions right there. That's what I was getting. And so anyway, when I read that thing, so that was 27 years after that happened. Anyway, he just walked a few steps and stuck his hand to it. It looked like the sky and ripped it open like a veil. And he stood up and climbed out of there, and he motioned me to come with his short, stubby arms. His arms could get long, too, wanted to, but they were sort of stubby. So I climbed up, and he was staring at me and speaking to me. His breath was so foul, I never could tell you how many eyes he had because it was like steam coming off of hot road in the summertime. You just distorted. The smell was awful. And he was speaking in a different language, but then I could understand it. And he was telling me it was granted me to see this place. He hated my guts, I know that. And he offered me half the kingdom. If I curse God, curse myself, curse this, curse that, curse the devil, curse anything, just curse, then I could have half the kingdom here. And I was too scared. I didn't know what he was talking about. And then he started showing me this place the Bible calls it the pit of hell. It's found in the scriptures, mentioned in Revelation, the bottomless pit, which it is as well. It's a different spiritual dimension. It's inside the earth, but it's a different dimension. And Ezekiel chapter 32 talks about hell being round about with cells stuck in there. So I came out of a chamber of death, a cell that it's mentioned in the Hebrew translations. They talk about the chambers of death or the cells or the dungeon cells. So there's cells there. They're bedded in the wall of the pit, and they grow. It grows. They keep growing back for the recesses of the pit. Pretty everything. The Bible is the only place I found that described the place I saw. There were no other. I looked. That was the only place. It was the Bible. First started reading it and started looking at it. And I go, wow, this is what I saw.
And that's not an uncommon experience. I mean, I've met a lot of near-death experiencers who maybe weren't as familiar with God's word or didn't really read the Bible. And then they'll find confirmation of what they encountered in heaven when they're simply reading God's word.
Well, that's what happened to me. I didn't know anything about it. It's just that afterwards I came back and I would be reading and studying the Bible. But when I came back, I was driven into the Bible, and I kept finding answers. And it was like opening up to me. And later, when I came to Ezekiel 32, looked at a Hebrew study of it, it was like, wow. In
terms of some of the things you encountered in hell, having heard your story numerous times. You had the experience of encountering people in I think what you might describe as cells. And that's not everybody sees that when they have a disturbing or distressing near-death experience, but it's rather common for people to describe what looks like prison cells or jail cells. I'd love to hear, Bryan, just like kind of what did those look like? Like what size were they? And give us a couple of examples of the people you saw, or I guess better to say the souls of people and what was happening to them in those cells.
Yeah, I'll give you a brief description. This pit was shaped like a spiral staircase. The bricks in the wall would be the cells, and the stairs would be this slowly this spiral down or up. I knew this. The people above me were not getting the recompense in the degree that I was, and the people below would get far worse. It was different degrees of recompense.
So the deeper you were in the pit, the worse your experience was going to be.
Yeah. And in all these cells, I wrote in my book 10 by 10, but they're actually about 14 or 15 by 15. I took the liberty, and I have to take responsibility for it, but 10 is easier to spell multiple times than 14 or 15. Please understand that,
you
folks.
saved some word count in your first book.
Yes, save some word count. Yeah, so 8 letters and verses 3. So, but anyway, and they were in there, and what was unique about them is that what was inside their mind, as the preacher said, whatever's inside their mind supplies what they see. And what you're getting is recompense of things they did in life coming back to them, and to the degree or measure. The same measure that you measure will be measured back to you. It's just like that. And the demons would give the illusion of people, tables, chairs, everything. So when I looked inside the cells, for some reason, I was granted to have like a voice from above. I wrote in my book would be talking to me, and then this thing talking to me. It was like these people. I had a download on them, and it's the only way I can describe it. Back then in the day, I didn't know what a download was, but that's a better term for it. I just knew in an instant their life history, who they were, and they, some people. I saw different types of people in there, and there are people who think that they're very good, but they can't maintain goodness for any indefinite period of time. It's impossible because of our nature. But it's what's in the heart of people that's being judged. And so gossip, slander. And so some of them would experience gossip and slander. When I first arrived there, most of the people I saw were bored out of their skull. And that was their torment. It was like they're bored. It was hot. And some of them were in the environment they knew about, or the era of time. A lot of them entered into was pure darkness. And slowly, I remember standing in front of one cube. I looked inside of it, and the darkness got lighter and lighter, and I could see in it. There was a guy in there, and all these spiders chained to the wall. They weren't spiders. They were just yelling at him and mimicking and mocking him of things. His lust and his ideas that he harbored inside was coming back to haunt him. And so I saw people instantly in flames. The editors took out all this stuff, references. I put people in holes and in pits and stuff. I kept seeing some stuff was edited out, but it's in the original draft in the Library of Congress. So that's what I was seeing. And I saw, I told so many different people, and depending on what they did, this one guy died in the 1950s, and he had the typical furniture there, and he was an alcoholic, and he beat his kids with his fist in his mouth, and abusive and everything. Just sitting there, and everything he would say to his son, "Get me a beer," or whatever, son, and then he would hear the beating and stuff, and he would be growling. You'd think people would get reformed there. They don't. It's there. It's like what Job says in chapter 26. Hell hath no covering, or the Abaddon, this place of destruction, has no covering. Everything is being uncovered. Your real sin natures, you're becoming that. It's like the demons would be, if you had demons in the cell, which that guy did, he thought those were the tables and chairs. But anyway, they would, it would be like, we'll make it stop if you become more like us. It's the best way I can describe it. But they don't deliver. They don't deliver. And that's exactly what I was seeing. And, there's a lot of people. The one I remember the most, and I put in the book, and for years, I didn't even know why I put it in there, but it was stuck out, was the chapter on deer pudding. This lady, a tornado dropped in front of us. We walked down to her cell. She knocked She thought, well, what I could see what they could see. Well, don't ask me how that is. She thought that she was in paradise as soon as she didn't know she was in a pit. She couldn't smell the smells or feel the heat. She stood in front of her cell and knocked on the door, and her grandmother opened and welcomed her there. And then we walked up, and I'm looking inside the cell, watching everything transpire. And she goes, and her grandmother goes, "Welcome, dear Pudding," because he called her Pudding. "Welcome, dear Pudding. Welcome to paradise. Can't you feel the love here?" "Oh, grandmother, I do." And there's Uncle Joe and all these people there meeting her and giving her hugs and all that stuff, and very just loving and kind. We have medical resuscitation now. I want people to think hard and heavy about it. If she were resuscitated back to life through medical means, what would her testimony be about? What would be mine if I got resuscitated, floating through the void, going to the light and feeling all this love? What would my, death is a lot longer than most people think.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the challenges. I mean, we're all thankful for our modern medical technologies and just our ability to resuscitate people so much better. I believe is one of the reasons we hear so many more of those near-death experience accounts. But like you're saying with that young woman who, we'll call her the deer pudding story, or even your story, whether it was going towards the light or when you were on the landscape before, the house that looks like the house you grew up in, like you would have thought you were with your welcoming committee, welcoming you into heaven. You would have never thought you were entering into a hellish experience.
Nope, not at all. I kind of had an inkling of it because I was judged, but it was like, at first it was kind of like, I almost got took in by it, really. I learned something from the experiences, how deceptive the demonic world is. And that's what people don't realize, even in Christian churches, how deceptive they are. And they go at any lengths to capture a soul.
Well, it's kind of the opposite of what God is doing, because we've heard those near-death experience accounts where people are turning to Jesus in the midst of they're having a car accident and everything goes in slow motion. Or I think of like our friend Ian McCormick, where he's in the ambulance and his mom is praying for him back home in, I want to say, New Zealand. And he's seeing the words of the Lord's Prayer in the air in the ambulance, and he starts praying and gets saved in the ambulance. And so, on the one hand, we have God pursuing his way in every moment, and it almost seems like Satan's trying to pull people down into the pit in his own way as well. Like both sides are pursuing us, if you will. I know I know you've shared this in other interviews. I know we didn't share this in my interview last time. It's not uncommon for people who have hell experiences to see famous people or notable people. I've had people claim to see famous preachers and people throughout history and different folks in hell. But you saw Hitler in hell, in his cell, and experienced torment. I know we never got into that with my last interview with you. I'd love to have you get into that a little bit this time, just because it's a pretty unique aspect of your story and what you saw.
Yeah, I always kept it to myself. I didn't want to sensationalize anything. But anyway, I was doing a docudrama, and I didn't realize I thought the camera had the red light on, but they were filming me. I just saw a red light. Then they start asking me some questions. I didn't know they were filming it. They asked me if I saw anybody. I said, Reinhard Heydrich, which I kind of hinted at in the book. And I saw Adolf Hitler and quite a few other people, but I didn't want to sensationalize it. So the word got out through the docudrama, and I can't do anything about it. That's fine. But anyway, I saw him there. He was inside of a cell. Reminded me of an oven. He was being burned in an oven. And it was like I know it sounds strange, but when the cells would move at a certain time, the scenes would change. So I'd imagine that he would be reliving every person through the gas chambers, being gassed, bus shipped there, stand up through 400 mile train ride in freezing weather in a boxcar, then go out, then they go into some shower room and gassed. He would experience every single person that was killed in World War II that he's responsible for, as well as some of the people he did as well. And so so that's what I saw. And so and he wasn't getting worse. He wasn't getting better. Excuse me, I should rephrase that. He wasn't getting better. He was getting worse. What a vile, hate-filled man. And utter devoid of feeling, could be yelling and screaming while he's on fire. Obscenities and yelling at God and spouting off hate and just the vileness of it. How do you know what he's saying? You speak German? No, you just know, you hear you just know what they're saying.
Right.
I can't explain it. It's like I heard different languages and I could understand them. It was like granite to me for that. That I can't explain. His was on their cells were stacked 6 high, so his upper level, but they go back to the back wall of the pit where most of these people are. You got to understand there are places where cavernous openings that would go off in the distance you would see are great openings, and I didn't write all that in the book, where I could see just like from you walking from just out of your kitchen into your living room or something that fast, seeing a big open area where a bunch of people were groping around either in darkness or semi flames, but they couldn't see each other. And you can see a big wall. You can see these creatures up there laughing. I don't know what that was about. Some people who've seen hell, that's what they see. I only wrote about what I saw and stared at. So I couldn't write everything. It's too difficult when I was writing the book. I should have wrote that in there. I kind of gave an allusion to it, but about the cathedral hallway that I was in for a little bit.
So you're in hell with the sights, the sounds, the smells, all these things, that you're experiencing. It is odd how when people are in their spirit body, they describe all the same senses that we have from our physical body, and kind of that knowing, that spirit to spirit communication. Like, you don't even have to ask questions. Like everybody describes, like you just understand. Communication is instantaneous. Like you just know you can communicate. There's nothing you have to try to do there. So you're seeing other people being tormented in cells. What's happening to you? Are you being taken towards what might be your eternal resting place or place of torment? Like where are you being taken after you start seeing all these things around you?
At the time, I didn't know. I was too scared. I was very scared. And the memories are embedded in your mind. I remember seeing all kinds of people, but I was going down further into the spiral to another location, and looking back in hindsight and knowing that there's a thing I always talk to near-death experience or after-death people who've come back. How do you handle this feeling of eternal time? It's like you can't. There's no time, but there's a flow and an ebb to it. And I remember, that's the only thing I can say. And everybody seems to agree. It's like a flow and ebb to it. It's there. I even feel it right now. It's just there. But it's like people don't know, with this thin veil that we have stepping into eternity is right there. But anyway, I don't want to get off the subject. But anyway, that feeling, and I look back on it, it would explain how John, who wrote the book of Revelation, could see Ezekiel measuring the temple and vice versa. So that's what I'm talking about. So I saw where my cell entered, where I entered, and where it would be, because they kind of slowly drift down to lower levels, and the kind of going like a conveyor system. It's real slow, and it clicks and moves. And the people inside don't know they're going lower, but the torment's increased. And so this would be where my cell would be. That's what I saw my own cell where it would be.
And how do you, like, what was your ticket out? How do you exit out of hell? Because obviously you're back here with us all these years later, sharing your story. And there's a range of circumstances, it seems, for why God will pluck people out of hell, as they're being pushed toward their place of eternal torment, if you will. I feel like a lot of times it has to do with prayer. Like if I had $1 for every time it was their grandmother, their mother has been praying and interceding for them, often for decades. That's a very common reason that they either are told specifically or understand why they're being released from hell or given a second chance. I always got to comment and say, dads, grandpas, we got to step up our prayer game, because I have yet, after 8-9 years, to hear that's because of a father's prayer. Like we got to do better, guys. It's always the mother or the grandmother. And I've heard that quite a few times from people who've had distressing NDEs. Like for you, Bryan, like what was the circumstance for you being taken out of hell and coming back?
Well, just from coming back, when I told my parents I found Jesus, and then I found out my parents were praying for me, grandparents, a lot of pastors and preachers on both sides of the family praying for me. I had people from the early days of Campus Crusade of Christ praying for me, the Jesus people, that move of God. Those people were around that time, people I knew who got saved, and they were praying for me. I knew there were a lot of people praying for me. So yeah, there was that. Quite a few. Had a visited by my mom, set me up with this pastor, got out of seminary school, and at the house I'm drinking a beer, playing a board game with him, and he's trying to witness to me. He's one of those guys I just couldn't stump, but he left a good impression on me. And so, but I'm sitting there drinking a beer, but that guy was praying for me. So I know all these people were praying for me. And the only reason I actually came back is just by God's grace. It's definitely not me, because I deserve hell. I mean, I know that. I saw what I am really like on the inside, and Jesus does change you from the inside out, thankfully.
And what was, I don't remember if we covered this in our conversation last time, Bryan, but this is a question I like to ask. What was re-entry like for you returning to your body? You know, some people, they've told me how it's kind of traumatic, almost like their spirit. Like Heidi Barr talks about, like it felt like her spirit didn't fit inside her body and Jesus had to like smooth her out so she could fit again. I've had other people be like, yo, it was a complete reverse. Like went through this light and down this tunnel and then I was back in my body. And, you know, others, it's simply like, oh, I just woke up, you know, and that's the whole thing. For you, what was it like returning to your body? Normal, traumatic, in between? What'd that look like for you?
It was very traumatic. First is that when I saw where my cell would be, it was open, and then I realized that half the host of hell would be there to torment me, and then I was at my wit's end, and then I won't get into how Jesus actually came and rescued me from there before I was thrown in this place, and he carried me in his arms, and he carried me back up, and I was crying on his shoulder. I want to give you the shorthand edition of this, and then we went back up to where my cell was when I entered. It went into that one and went through the tornado vortex, and he came out to that big, huge rock where it all started. He sat my feet on there, and he spoke to me some things, and he blew on me, and I went backwards. I went through the black void. The light got dimmer and dimmer. Then I came to a point, and for a split second, it was like I was floating downwards like a leaf, like this. I went through the ceiling, came in, and I could see my body for a second. And then I went rock back and forth. I went feet first in my feet. Then my body laid back in me, and I could not breathe. I was in excruciating pain, the fever, everything hit. My neighbor must have found me. This part's very cloudy. I don't remember. I couldn't breathe. I was going, and my neighbor must have found me. And so, 4 hours later, I remember standing outside. I'm not quite sure how I got outside. I don't remember too much, but he got me in the truck. I'm dying on the way to the hospital, floating above the cab of the truck as he ran red lights. And I would describe him the event. He go, how do you know that? Your head's banging against the glove box, just chilling out above the cab of the truck. It was when I get in my body, the pain was there. And so, and one time when I was in the hospital, I remember hearing the heart monitor go flatline, and then I heard started to leave, and all of a sudden I went back in real quick. They were, I don't know, the doctor's doing all kinds of things, and I snapped out of it, so came back. I mean, it's all cloudy.
So like big picture, you had like four or five out of body experiences across this whole journey. Like you left your body multiple times.
I don't really consider those really out of body because I didn't stay anywhere. I just floated above and back down.
Yeah, your spirit left your body, even if it was short. I mean, that's the classic textbook definition of an OBE, an out of body experience, is your spirit left your body. So a lot of people may have once or twice, but I don't think I've had many NDE testimonies where it's like 3, 4, 5 times. So although it sounds like being out of body was probably more comfortable than being in that truck on the way to the hospital.
It definitely was. It was no pain. When you get in your body, the pain, the fever, the rattling of your teeth. And then I realized that, when I was coming back and this sounds, and people don't have to believe me at all. Doesn't matter to me. But I just want to, serve Jesus. Just the fact is that they were saying my blood was viscous, and I described my symptoms to people. So you had the beginning stages of rigor mortis. I did. I've gone for 4 hours, so they say. And so I had no elasticity in my skin. And a doctor from India is one who was the ER doctor who, when I came back, he goes, Mr. Melvin, tell me who is running for president. No, Ronald Reagan, who's president? Jimmy Carter. Where do you live? Phone number. So I gave phone numbers to some relatives that were in town. My Pentecostal relatives. And so numbers of how to contact people. And they were just working on me and stuck IVs in me and saline solution. My electrolytes were nil, and they pumped all that stuff into me. And they did get the blood thin enough to do the blood test. So it was looking back on it, at the time, I thought there was nothing. I really did. I thought I came back. I'm glad to be alive. I'm blowing on my hand. Blowing on my hand. Well, why would you do that? Because you don't breathe in hell. I want to make sure I'm not in a cube. That's what I told the doctor. Am I in cube? No, you're in a hospital. And I shut up after that.
Did you feel pretty disoriented trying to figure out what was going on in the hospital?
At first. It was later. I remember recuperating. I don't have any memory how long I was in the hospital. It could have been overnight. Could have been a day. I mean, I don't know. I was too weak. And they filled me up with all kinds of stuff to get me going.
Well, and we're running out of time here, so I got a couple places I want to go before we wrap up. Obviously, anybody who has a near-death experience, it's going to transform you. On average, according to Dr. Jeffrey Long's research over at indifference.org, it takes about 7 years for somebody to really come to terms with all that they experience. I always say it's because our finite human brain can't handle the heavenly download they got, while they were on the other side. So it takes seven years to come to terms. Two things I'd like to have you touch on quickly, Bryan, before we wrap up. How were you initially transformed on the other side of your NDE? Like what changed? And then take us into how God helped you overcome the trauma and the PTSD, because God wasn't done working on you yet immediately following your time in hell. So initial transformation, and how did God bring further healing for you later in the journey?
I just remember when I got out of the hospital, it was early morning. My guys I rented rooms from, they were back and they were leaving for work. And I had to have electrolyte like Gatorade and stuff. I had different stuff. Paregoric, so to stop you up. And, you had all that. I only take it at night. So I had 2 doses left. You take it at night. So I wasn't even on anything. But anyway, and belladonna, they give you this Donatol stuff and all kinds of stuff. I tell people what I was taking. Oh, that's basic cholera treatment back in the day. And so, recovery. And so that's what I was doing. And so I sat in a beanbag chair. They left. And my dog was really happy, German Shepherd, all over you. Couldn't get enough of me being back. I couldn't get enough of my dog either. People knew I changed. I wouldn't tell anybody what happened. They go, "What happened, Bryan? What happened? Something happened to you. What happened? Bryan, you died. What happened to you? Nothing. Nothing." I'd get fear in my face trying to, and stuff. So I didn't want to say anything. I didn't know what to do with it. I just sat in the beanbag chair and I said, "Lord Jesus, I never want to go back to that awful place. Take me, I'm yours. I owe you my life." That's exactly what I prayed, because I did owe my life. I can't ever pay it back. I never could, never will be able to. But I know I deserve hell. I know I deserve God's wrath. I don't deserve mercy, but I found grace instead. And so I have a unique perspective of God's grace. And it changed me. And it took me a little while to change because I was alcoholic and drinking all the time, and I didn't know how to be sober. So right after that, I noticed that when I was drinking, all I got was a headache, and I never got drunk, never got a buzz. And I just felt miserable. And then I caught God's sense of humor. And so when I started going to a church, I had my tube of toothpaste to cover my breath, but they didn't condemn me. They loved on me, and they helped me get off the alcohol. It wasn't for them people. God just set things up. And so I was going to church, and my life dramatically changed because, like I said, when I was hearing the Bible read from the pulpit, it was alive to me. And then I got into it, started reading. I went to a Southern Baptist church. That's what I did. I didn't know where else to go. So I went to the Southern Baptist church in Fort Collins there, in here where I live now. And I told my pastor about what happened. He was the first person I told. He said, "You should write a book." And then I felt a little relieved, but these people they had a big debate if I should, in this men's Bible study, because they're studying the book of Jeremiah, and if I would be able to handle it, being a new believer. And one guy stood up. I was there, and he stood up for me. So all the deacons voted me in. I think I got in by 2 votes. And so my first book I actually read from cover to cover is the book of Jeremiah, which I actually enjoyed it. And after that, I started getting into the Bible. And this guy taught me to do Greek studies, Hebrews, and I got another church where I was studying to be in a ministry type thing. You take these, they have these church classes, basic, your foundational Greek, Hebrew stuff. The rest you just work on your own. So yeah, I started reading the Bible primarily. And then I found answers of what happened to me, but I kept it quiet. I told some pastors, 2 other pastors told me to write a book. And finally in 86 or 87, the pastor of a church allowed me to share my testimony. He only says, I'm going to give you your testimony in 10 minutes. I took 13 minutes to do my testimony, shorthand. 34 people ran up to get saved, literally ran out of their seats. I said, this is what I'm supposed to do. This is the Lord had it all planned. And I just didn't, just kind of walking into it. And so I kept it quiet for some time. It takes time to process it. It does. It does. And coming to terms with what you see.
Well, that's impressive for you to do any form of your testimony in 13 minutes because you have so much to share from your experience. Before we wrap up, Bryan, I'd love to hear about Jesus bringing you back to heaven and why he did that and what he healed in you. What were the things that were still bothering you? Was there unresolved trauma? Because again, we kind of gloss over sometimes the results of we always talk about, the positive impact of an NDE, but for people who have these disturbing or distressing, we call them a DNDE, they often have a lot of trauma, fear, PTSD that has to be dealt with.
Yeah.
Is that some of the stuff Jesus healed for you when he brought you back to heaven?
Yeah, absolutely. This was early 1980s when it happened, 1980, and then started going to church. I did not know anything about PSD, did not know anything about trauma, didn't know any of these things. And so I just had no clue about it. And I was going through stuff. I had post-traumatic stress. I had all the symptoms. Light sounds literally make me drift back into the event. I'm just only now coming to terms with some medical condition that I've been having for some time. And it's actually from drinking the bad water. It's nerve damage to my gut. I found out that the neurotoxin in the cholera can cause gut nerve damage. And as you get older, it really flares up. It just mimics the symptoms again. It's like a reminder this happened. But I had to come to terms medically with stuff. I had to come to terms with the post-traumatic stress, nightmares, dreams, walking in a mall, watching them changing a mannequin. I'd flip out. I'd sweat. I'd shake. I'd grab hold of the rail. It was a Cherry Creek Mall, looking down at the bottom floor there, and echoey. And I'm back in hell for a split second. Literally can't. And I'm shaking. And people, all of my friends in a Bible group there were asking what was wrong. Oh, nothing. I just don't feel real good right now. I'll be fine. I'm going to get a soda or something. That's what it was. Nightmares, night things. And I remember when Jesus say his name and his title, Jesus Christ. I remember when I had the nightmares of being in hell again, the nightmares that would come of different events there. I'd wake up shouting, Jesus Christ, Jesus Christ, Jesus Christ, Jesus Christ, Jesus Christ. That's what I did to help get over it. And I had no idea this. It also drove me to work. I got involved in a church where you could lose your salvation type of doctrine was there. And I'm not trying to get on anybody's case now, but I didn't feel eternally secure. I thought, I don't want to go back to that awful place. I got involved in this church. And the pastor liked how I prayed. I was the head intercessor. I was in the praise band. I ran the soundboard. I did street witnessing. We had a ministry started with street kids coming to where I lived at the time. And we had 24-hour ministry, deliverances, the whole bit. And I was constantly busy. I was driven to be busy. I just couldn't. I worked. I also starting a business, washing windows at the same time. I was frantic. That's the only way I can describe it. I don't know if that's similar to other people who had this. That's just what you do. And so about a little over 2.5 years later, and I know I got a picture of me after it happened. And when I flew back home to see my parents, they bought me this nice suede jacket for church and a nice tie and shirt, back in the day when you wore that stuff. But then, so just before that, the Lord allowed me to see heaven to calm me down about seeing hell. I've determined this, Shaun, that a lot of people have seen hell will be allowed to see heaven one way or another, either afterwards or sometime after their experience they're taken. I find that to be pretty much, I wasn't aware of it until I've been talked to you and others on this. And that's quite common to calm you down about it. Cause that's when he took me up to heaven, it was literally to calm me down about hell. And plus, there's a lot of things I learned up there. I wrote it in my Heaven Beckons book, try to put it in there in a way that can understand it. So, but anyway.
And would you say Jesus allowing you to see heaven a second time, did that give you that assurance that you were longing for? It sounds like
Yeah,
you wanted assurance that you weren't going back into the pit again.
you better believe it. I was adamant. And what happened was John 10. No one can snatch you out of my hands. Are you greater than I am, Bryan? You think you, a mere human being, can jump out of my hands? Ha ha ha, these types of things. No, you can't. I got you. I rescued you from hell. Okay, I got it.
Sounds
Yeah,
like
Lord, I'm a mess. Yeah, I know you are.
sounds, it sounds like God addressing Job. Were you here when I created, the foundations of the earth? I mean, come on.
So I said, okay, then I'm eternally secure, and in Him, and I can't jump out of His hands. He. I found out in heaven. This will sound strange, but God is the author of choice. He gave humanity a choice in Genesis chapter 1, verse 26. Have dominion, exercise it, raise a family. Said, name animals, take care of the earth. Don't eat of this tree. Don't do. He had to make choices. He's not a slave to our free moral will at all. He had to violate it by sending His word, Jesus, to give us the ultimate choice when before we had none. He's not guilty at all for foreknowing everything and what we will do with it.
Well, that's so hard for us to grasp, as you had alluded to earlier. When you were on the other side of the veil, you're outside of space and time, and it's very
Mhm.
difficult for us here in our physical body that's time bound and earth bound to even begin to grasp what does it mean for people who are in heaven or hell and God just to be outside of our normal space time existence. It's just other things, you see other things. I think a lot of it beyond what we can understand right now. Bryan, in terms of your story, whether somebody reads, well, really either of your books or they watch some of your interviews, like what's the takeaway you want every person to get from your story? Because I feel like it's easy to fixate on like, oh my gosh, Bryan saw Hitler in hell, or oh my gosh, Bryan had this false welcoming committee showing up, and the demons were trying to deceive him. Like you've got so many unique beats to your story that I've never heard in other near death experience testimonies. It's easy just to focus on one of those things when we tell other people about this amazing testimony we heard. But like for you, like what's that takeaway you want everybody to get from your story?
Well, just that I want to see people get saved, born again, and also disciple, train them. And I like to share some of the things I learned, not to make myself out to be somebody or not. I'm not out to make $1 million. I'm not any of those things. I don't want a name for myself. And I know I look a lot younger than I am. My gene pool, my dad's side of the family, all the men don't look their age. But anyway, but I just want people to know Christ. I'm not trying to make myself out to be somebody. I mean, you need to know Jesus, who Jesus is, and what He went through on the cross for us, and what He went through just before the cross too, is what stuck in my mind. I learned a little bit of it when I was coming back from hell, and then when I got the full revelation in when I saw heaven of the cross and the event. And I think a lot of that is left out. We reduced the gospel message to bullet points. There's nothing wrong with the bullet point method on the Romans road. I'm not against any of that. That does get people saved. But when you make it real that people have, we're just like Judas. We sell people out for 30 pieces of silver. We are just like the scribes and Pharisees plotting to get rid of somebody who got in your way, who's maybe taking your job away from you or whatever. Yeah, we bear false witness. Oh yeah, we abandon people in the garden. We deny more than 3 times, and we spit on people, maybe not physically or beat people physically. We sure do it with contempt in our hearts. We put burdens on people they can't bear. We go to somebody and we make, God, if you're, like Herod, we're like Herod. We want to see the Lord do some miracle just to make them dance for us. We're all guilty. And then Jesus says, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Now you do. Now He wants to forgive you. When you accept that, He resurrects you out of this death. We live in this world, to put it mildly, where we only have the knowledge of good and evil. Sin entered the world, so we have this knowledge of good and evil. And how in the world are we going to hate evil unless we live through it and make a decision if we're going to abide in it or not? And that's the ultimate decision Christ asked each person. Do you want to continue living in this mess, or do you want him to change you from the inside out and resurrect you from your dead?
Yes, and become that new creation where even what we see with our eyes is different than we saw it before we knew Jesus. Bryan, just to give people context, you've got 2 books, A Land Unknown and Heaven Beckons. Describe what parts of your stories are covered in each of those books.
The Land Unknown book is my first book. That has my hell testimony in it. It gives you, I didn't know how to write it. I wrote, my first draft of the book was like 80 pages and it was bad and I didn't do anything with it. So I had notes and stuff. And after I got out of college and started working in criminal justice field, I started to write my book and I had enough now to know what a creative nonfiction. So both of my books are in creative nonfiction, which means they're true stories, but certain events of my life in both books I mix up into one thing. And I had to change the names of people and stuff. Those all happened in the book. So in the first book, I wanted people to know what I was like beforehand. So, and it was a mess. And what he did afterwards. And so when I saw delayed writing in my heaven book, and as I tried to tell you when I wrote it, says, it's a mess. It's a mess. And I'm thankful that the Destiny Image editors cleaned it up. I'm very appreciative of it because I could not clean it up. I didn't know what to throw out. I just, it was so hard to write because it's just so much there. And so it was really good to work with some good editors. And so then the second book came out, was about heaven and some of the things I learned from that experience when I came back. And so in the heaven book, I just explained my background going to several different churches, but I put it all in one church. These things actually happened, how I took drug addicts and drunks to church. I had a reputation of street evangelism and dragging people to church and praying for people and all this stuff. And so I wanted to bring that out. And also I wanted to stress primary importance, how I thought I was going to lose my salvation, but you're not. And it's what was that? There's a song called Holy Water. I'm just trying to remember the verse. It says, Lord, I never want to abuse your grace. I need it every day. For by it, it is the only way I really want to change. The only thing that really wants me to make me change, something like that. Grace makes you want to change. It's not a license to sin. So people need to get over that.
Well,
we all need that grace.
And we'll make it easy like we do with every episode. We'll have links in the description and show notes too, where you can pick up both of Bryan's books. Bryan, for the listeners and viewers who want to connect with you, what's your website? What's your YouTube channel? Like, where can we find you and your content on the web?
Yeah, my website, I'm waiting to someday I get enough money to redo the thing. I'm trying to work on that, but some more, bills always come up. But anyway, so I have my website is After Hours Ministries, plural, afterhourministries.com. That will give you to a bunch of links, but it's old website. Bear with me on that. But you can contact me by email at bwmelvin1@gmail.com or Bryan, Bryan Melvin 1@AOL.com. You can try to contact me that way. I have a YouTube channel called, and Rumble channel. It's called YouTube is at the Christian Marauder. And it's a nickname someone gave me when I worked on the side doing some side work with computer gaming companies. They called me Marauder Mel. So I said, well, I'm Christian Marauder. I go behind the lines and get people saved.
Well, and we'll be sure to link to Bryan's website. Again, give him grace. He's going to get that updated eventually. And also link to his YouTube and Rumble channels. Bryan, always a pleasure to see you, my friend. And thank you for sharing a longer form testimony with us today. I always love hearing your story. I know that as I've seen with other interviews we've done, I know viewers are going to be impacted. People are going to be finding Jesus from this interview, and just always honored to get to spend time with you. So thanks for pouring into us today, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate it too, Shaun. It's good to see you again.